Welcome to the Digital Amateur Television Experimenters Night. This is VK7OTC, the club station of the Radio and Electronics Association of Southern Tasmania. Amateur radio is a worldwide hobby that has many different aspects. Digital television is just one of the many modes and areas that are covered. Maybe you're interested in becoming involved in the DATV Experimenters Nights. Do you realise that you do not have to be a radio amateur or need any ATV equipment to participate anywhere in the world? Also participate in the night by coming up to the Queen's Domain clubrooms. Yes, right on top of the Queen's Domain in the heritage-listed Coast Wireless Station. You never know, we might get you in front of the camera or behind doing one of the many roles during the night. We get underway with our program on a Wednesday night from 7:30 p.m. local time. We'll see you soon. This is VK7 OTC.
Try and find the shag belly.
Okay.
Well, here we go.
Thanks for coming along. And I just have to apologise to our online viewers because they're probably getting a little bit confused because there's a couple of sessions that we had to set up there, but they'll find the right one eventually. And I'll be doing some presentation, and then we'll be handing it around the room. Can you please? We've had some feedback from our previous sessions that this is a close speaking microphone, so you need, when you get handed it, please do this so that we pick it up. These are not bad, but for those people who it's focused on, you really do need to talk into it closely. So tonight is, we were talking it up as the zombie apocalypse. It's all about emergency communication. That's what it's about. That's
a disappointment.
Well, I did give a bit of a reference to, there's a 2017 movie called Cargo, which is, if people haven't seen it, please look it up. It is a zombie apocalypse movie that was actually filmed in the Riverland of South Australia. It's got Martin Freeman in it as the main person, so it's worth a look because it's not a bad watch. But yes, it is a zombie apocalypse movie. So what I was going to do was just start off with a few things focused on, and I have to say, on cue, we had our wild weather event just recently, and there's a number of people here who I think had, at least Stuart, had power off for a significant amount of time. I was in the northwest on the weekend. The northwest is a disaster zone. There were so many trees down, so many things happening in the northwest. I really feel for the northwest of this state and the north of this state. That's where all the power outages were. And so there is hopefully some experience that can be related as part of that. And so what I was going to do was start off with power outages as a bit of a theme that we can go through. Power outages, certainly there's obviously things like generators that people may have. I'll give you an example of a good use of a generator. Next door in Tas Maritime Radio, they actually have a pretty decent generator that if the power is lost up here, they can wheel out. They have a switchboard that's wired such that they can plug the generator in, switch over to the generator and start running off of generator. And so they're actually wired such that they can do that. So it's a good example of that. I brought along some show and tell. There is obviously things like portable solar cells, which I use to charge batteries in vehicles and bits and pieces. There's a built-in regulator in there. I won't hand it around, it's pretty heavy, but please come up and have a look at it if you're interested later. There is obviously batteries. Now, battery technology has come a very long way. If this was a lead-acid battery, I wouldn't be lifting it with one hand.
Of course you would, Justin.
Yeah, right. And so there are things like this. This is a 50 amp hour. There are 100 amp hour and more to that. This has got, this is what I actually use for field day. So it's got some Andersons on it. It's got some banana plugs on it. It's got a voltmeter on it. And I've got a couple of these. These normally sit on my power supply at home. My power supply at home is a commercial unit for a repeater installation. If you've been on any repeater installations, you've probably seen them. It's a 2RU rack unit. You can connect a battery to it. It automatically changes over to the battery. So these normally sit on the power supply at home. And so if the power goes off, I've still got radios. Lots of people have UPSs, so uninterruptible power supplies. I've got a couple of UPSs on critical bits of network infrastructure. There'll be some laughing in the room. The NBN box and the critical switches and routers all keep going when the power goes off. Now, the issue with that is, that's great short term. For the sort of long-term outages that we were talking about with the weather event, it's useless. The UPSs will well and truly be exhausted by then. So there needs to be other things. Battery inverters, whole range of different sizes. That's a little 300 watt one that I usually carry in the van for equine endurance events. So there is so I can get 240 volts. There are a couple of things that I only have 240 volts for. Laptops, there is, and there's a whole lot of commercial and not so commercial. This is not so commercial. This is a 12 volt in and 19 volt out for laptops. And the thing I really like about this is this was designed by an RF engineer and is absolutely quiet. So, but there are commercial environments. There's obviously things like you've got battery packs, and I have to thank Ben for this one. He donated this to the cause. It gets a lot of use. So it gives you your USB outlets, USB-C, USB-A, etc., all of that sort of stuff. Gas stoves. I'm talking not about power, I'm talking about boiling water. You need to boil water. So gas stoves, either the butane or actual gas. We have an on-demand gas hot water service at home, and guess what? What doesn't happen when the power's off? It doesn't fire up.
Same with the gas stove.
And so you need an alternative supply for the gas hot water if you want to continue. If the gas is there and there's power there, it'll heat the water, and the water's still flowing. That's another thing. If the water's still flowing. Lighting, 12 volts. There is plenty of LED lamps and bits and pieces and emergency lamps. There's also, I still have a gas lamp, which has got a mantle in it. If you remember those, I featured it not that long ago, because the mantle was an old one and still thorium encrusted, so it made the Geiger counter go off. Not to scare anybody, but heating. You've got the simplest option, which is more clothes, is the heating option. And I think you've got a diesel. Have you got a diesel heater in your van?
Yeah.
Because I heard it when I pulled up. So there are fantastic little diesel heaters. Runs off no diesel at all. It doesn't use very much diesel at all, and provides a whole lot of heat. There is obviously electric heating. There is obviously gas heating if you've got power. So that's a little bit of the sort of stuff that I use. Now, I was going to go around the room. We'll come back to the extreme space weather event, because I think that's a separate topic that we can go through, because there's a little bit that I want to go through in there. But I'll hand it round. Please share your power, lighting, UPS, keeping your laptops going, keeping your internet going, whatever experiences. So please, and reminder, close talking microphone. Which way do we want to go? That way? Okay, cool.
Well, I suppose I could share from our latest disaster in Tassie. I didn't lose it at home. I was lucky, even though at home I've got lithium ion, UPS as well for the network. I also have a high voltage solar regulator, which will take the 5 kilowatts on the roof, drop it down to 24 volts. So that's a handy trick as well. But out in the real world, where I was working at the time, anything from 400 kilowatt generators to 44s and a couple in between, and probably so there's no lack of power, but our problem out in the field is actually keeping them running. Yeah, supply of diesel, because then you've got your servos and which don't have power. So if they don't have power, you can't get diesel from them. And some of our generators are probably 100 litres to 200 litres an hour we're consuming. So that's one thing to keep in mind if you do have a generator at home, a good stock of fuel and turn it over, especially if it is diesel. As it doesn't sort of last that much unless you condition it. But yeah, anyway, that's about us.
Okay. Well, if I could get out to the remote shack, I've got complete off-grid, but would be getting there would be the fun, because you can get a lot of water and a lot of trees in between here and there. A couple of things I would caution about, though, is that it's all very well saying you're going to have the internet and you'll have your laptops and all this sort of good stuff, but the ability of Telstra to keep the signals flowing, if it's a long outage, are almost impossible for the same reasons that were mentioned. That just getting fuel up to the thing, and a lot of places, like if you're operating on 4G or 5G or whatever, on the cell sites they haven't got generators anyway. So as soon as the batteries run flat, that's it. You're off the air. So there are a lot of limits to what you can do. We are very dependent these days on other people. We are very difficult for us to be self-sufficient. As I say, my shack in the country is pretty much self-sufficient, and it will keep running as long as it's not May or June. It'll keep running forever, and I'll have 4 kilowatts of power forever. What do I say, May and June? Because the sun's not as strong in May and June, and so it doesn't recharge the batteries. If you take 4 kilowatts out, I can't get enough charge out of the solar, despite the fact that it's a lot of panels to recharge in May and June. Which incidentally I bring to your attention when they're wanking on about all this free solar power, that it's a little bit more limited than they'd like you to believe.
So I was thinking about what you could do if the sun wasn't shining and you got no power, thinking about how to plan so that while you've got your batteries operating, what do you do to set yourself up so that when your batteries have failed, you're ready to go with something. I'm also limbering up so that I can use my bicycle to keep power going. I think that would be a self-sufficient way of proceeding, not relying on anybody else.
And keeping warm.
Pedal faster, yes.
Getting fit.
Yes, well, I'm on tank water, so it's pretty essential that we have power. So I've got a 4 kilowatt petrol generator that I use to keep things going. We do have solar on the roof, but it's just hooked into the grid, not into batteries. I've solar hot water, which works extremely well. We don't have much power running to it at all over the summer months. Well, for 9 months of the year, we have power turned off to it. But as long as I got the water pump going to the house, the solar gives us plenty of hot water, so that's how we survive. And if I need any radios, well, I've got plenty in the cars. So I've got HF and all the other things. Oh, okay. Someone had a very funny phone call. Okay, Rocky, your turn.
Thank you. I haven't got a real lot to add. A bit more when we go around on the zombies topic next time round, I think. But anyway, I've just got the standard stuff. I've got a generator, a small generator that can run some lighting and some radios and it can charge batteries. And Justin reminded me that I do have some inverters buried away in my shack somewhere. So that's pretty much what I'd be using. One thing I'll tell you about is I have some four-wheel drive batteries that I've had over the years in different four-wheel drives, and I've kept them charged up, and came to the conclusion that they weren't very good. They were past their use by date. They ran VHF and UHF radio okay, but they didn't have the guts for HF for a very not for a very long time. They just didn't have much go, so I just didn't worry about it. That I'll just replace them anyway. A couple of weeks ago, with this subject coming up here, I was going to take them to the tip, and I took them out from where they were out the shed, around the back of the shed in the dark, and I brought them around to the front of the shed, and I had them on a trolley, and I noticed the charge indicator on these batteries was bright green, and I thought, hang on, we've got this all looking good here. Why won't my HF radios work? And tested them with the tester, and they were all good to go. And then I discovered a connection in my 12 volt side of things that was down behind my shack that I'd sort of forgotten about, and contacts had loosened up on that, I guess, from a bit of use. But anyway, the upshot of it was I've recycled the batteries again and cleaned up the connections, and we're back in business. We can now run some HF again at full power until we, well, wouldn't be running on full power anyway, but nevertheless we can get a lot more power out of the HF radios just by cleaning up the connections. So the old story that I keep banging on about is look after your connections, DC and antenna. And the other thing is, if the power's off and you've got no other way of soldering, and you need 240 to solder or whatever, you really need to be looking at alternatives for repairing your cables and things, crimp on connectors and all that sort of stuff. So that's probably me this time round.
I hope my voice lasts the distance. This is the aftermath of COVID last year, but I don't want to talk about this current outage. Yes, my power went out on Saturday evening, early Saturday evening. UPS held the computer up, and I thought, hello, lights are out, so I shut the computer down and back up on Wednesday. But I want to talk about something else which was a little more serious and was bad enough down here. my background is in broadcasting, and in Mackay I went through Cyclone Debbie. Whatever you do, don't go through a cyclone if you're involved in broadcasting. And I can relate to whoever it was talking about the diesel. The diesel generator that we had there, 100 kilowatt, 100 kVA, and that ran 3 10 kilowatt FM services, and the road was blocked for 7 days before we could get through, and I was fingers crossed that we kept it up. But once the road was cleared, thanks to a local bloke, amazing job he did. There was just trees. This is about 2 kilometres of just trees all over the road, and finally got it cleared. And from then on, I had a 300 litre fuel pod in the back of a ute, and was just up and down, feeding this machine. We were on diesel for about, I think it was 2.5 weeks. $7,000 worth of diesel went into that over that time. That was just amazing. But I've got to say, I was a commercial radio, and the Broadcast Australia site were off air. I kept it going, and I was very proud of that. So, just another little side.
Do you think we'll go backwards, Bob or Chris? No?
Oh, sorry.
Or Alan? No? Yeah, go.
Have a real quick one. A couple of things. Like, I mean, I'm not quite as organised as most of the people here, I think, because I've only been here for a couple of months and I'm still in a temporary rental. But getting there, I've got the generator and I've got the battery and solar and everything else going. 2 UPSs, 1500 watts to run the computers. I've got some pretty high-end workstations that I need to shut down correctly. Is probably the best way to say it. But what I was going to say is my last life. I was living somewhere where we had power blackouts every day for 6 hours a day. And almost every house, if you could afford it, was on generator. So we had a very large generator sitting on the side of the house with a 500 litre, 800 litre tank, I think. And it was just turned on every day. And the switches were automatic and it was great. The other thing that saved us over there, and it may be a dirty word, and you guys can tell me if it's a dirty word, was satellite phones. I don't know if there's much use for them here. I'm hoping the radios will replace the need for a sat phone, but the sat phones there saved our lives on a number of occasions. So I'm assuming radios won't be an issue, and they'll do the job, but the sat phones certainly over in North Africa were the thing you had to have. So yeah.
The communication.
Yeah, and they mostly worked. So yeah, there was only a few times when they didn't work, and the main time when they didn't work was when the government got hold of the system and demanded that the satellite phones ran through the federal government switch so that they could then turn it off when they wanted to. But when we were going international, it was fine. So
a couple of things. First of all, the recent storm wasn't all bad. We actually had another lightning event. And it was better than the one back in February. So completed 4 QSOs on 1296 across to the mainland. I'm not sure that this is reliable for emergency communication, but I mentioned that. In terms of gear at home,
I'll have my generator back too when you finish with the
well, I do have a generator, but I do worry about the fact that petrol does go off. I don't know how often you need to replace petrol, but I thought the other thing that's worth mentioning is lots of things like repeaters go off because of lack of power, and on 1296 we have a repeater that doesn't require any power by reflecting off Mt Wellington. Okay. And we've now got, is it 43 stations have been active on 1296? So we can put together quite a group who can all communicate with each other. if necessary. Thank you.
Ken Goodsell from the men's shed. Yeah, I'm on water tanks, my own generator if I need it. I've avoided having solar panels because I really get upset with the idea that the solar panels only work if they're hooked through to 240 volts, unless you want to go completely off grid. So yeah, for a short term I can manage all right. The other interesting thing that I researched some time ago is if any of the nuclear power plants around the world have to shut down, the cooling period is normally 4 weeks. And on average, they only carried 2 weeks of diesel for their pumps. That's assuming, of course, if the zombies take it out or whatever reason, there's going to be communication and transport. Anyway, over the next.
Oh, thanks. Yes, my main concern in my environment is bushfires, and so I've set it up so I've got a 2 kilowatt generator which will just run until it runs out of fuel, and it pumps, but it will power 3 sprinklers which will keep the place damp until whenever. So it's just a hope and pray type thing, but it's at least I've probably got about 3 to 5 hours buffer zone. As far as water is concerned, we've got a gravity water system because I'm on a hillside, and so whenever the power goes off, we still have whatever's left in the hot water cylinder, and we can drink and make coffee, whatever. In terms of gas, I've got the old camping gas thing, so that's a 2-hob and a cylinder of that keeps us going. What concerns me most about these situations is communications by voice. You have to be there, you have to hear it. And so I'd be more interested in getting text, voice messages into text. And some of you may know of the various tone coding systems, and of all the ones that I've looked at, if anybody's interested in this area, is the DominoX 16. It's a very robust system, so it will take text, and it will send about an A4 page of text, so where the bushfire is, where the fire front is, or whatever, which roads are open, in about 3 minutes. So a full ACE4, and you get 3, and you can decode it on your mobile phone to text, and then you've got it there.
I'll just say if the mobile phone system is still up.
No, this is an app. This is the app. So it's
an audio.
It's just audio to text. So that's the other thing people should think about. Although your phone goes off and so you can't talk to people, it's worth putting on apps which run in the bit without any
needing mobile coverage.
No internet, no nothing. Yeah,
cool.
But
cool, great.
Just leave background in the back.
Just go. Any
takers?
I'll have a crack. I haven't got anything interesting to say about home because I live in the middle of suburbia in a tiny apartment. But about 12 years ago, I was working in the States, working for a very large startup, and one of our data centers was in Vegas, or on the outskirts of Vegas, and some bushfires took down a bunch of transmission lines into the data center, so they had no power. So I'm a computer scientist, not an engineer. So the company I worked for trucked most of its software engineering computer science team out to the middle of nowhere in Nevada to help fuel generators. So we ended up fueling I think there were two 2 megawatt Caterpillar generators to run a giant data center to get the HVAC and everything back online. And then the cell network went down, so then we had to use sat phones to communicate because the data center had a connection, but there was no cell network. And that's how I learned how to refuel both natural gas and diesel generators to the tune of 2 megawatts. Yeah.
I love it.
Wow.
Anyway, who's next? That's probably going to look very good on a resume.
Hello, we live in the same tiny apartment. So we don't own our roof, we don't own our utilities at all. But for people who do live in suburbia, we do have lots of these power banks, we have lots of batteries, we have handheld radios and torches and things. But one thing that I think people should keep in mind is that nowadays all of our devices are standard connections. So they are batteries themselves. So if you have laptops and phones and everything, they are usually end-to-end both input and output, and they can charge each other. So if we charge all our laptops and everything, then they can charge our phones, and they can keep all of each other alive for quite a long time. They don't have very much loss going from one to the other.
There was a great thing I saw on the ABC about exactly that, Mars, where there was a pub in the middle of an outage area, but the pub had power, so they had all of their charges. People could go to the pub, charge their phones, do whatever they had to do. They had internet, and they were sharing it from a central point. I thought that was fantastic.
See, where we are at the moment, we've got some solar panels up on the roof at the moment, and we've also got solar heating. So the downside is the solar panels don't have a battery attached to them, which is a little bit annoying when, say if you do have a power outage, well, during the day I don't know if the solar panels are able to compensate, maybe provide some power as backup, maybe. I don't know. But I've also got a ex-commercial sort of AGM battery and a charger that will allow me to charge up that battery to provide power to charge the phones up maybe through the night or something when the sun goes down. So if power, heaven forbid, if power does go out for a long period of time, well then that battery at home is able to actually charge the phones, iPads and laptops at least, and the radios to get information as well in and out of what information that we need. What else am I prepared? I've got a whole heap of antennas that are set up, I can quickly set up, ready to go, which make it nice and easy to position and jump straight on air. To get a VHF UHF base radio, it takes me in a hurry probably less than a minute, less than 2 minutes. I think I've timed it. So it usually doesn't take me long to jump on air if I need to. Pretty quick in a disaster, whether a power outage or a phone failure or anything close to that. So yeah.
I have a head torch.
Good work.
I have sufficient batteries to keep all my radios going for some days. And some commentators, perhaps one in particular, might say that I've got my priorities around the wrong way because everything else in my house, as soon as the power goes off, it's all over.
I think for our situation, the most important thing for us is we've got heaps of firewood always there. So we have a fair few years of firewood backed up, which I think for Tasmania is quite important. If when we had this latest weather event, I was having a chat to a chap up in the northwest who had power for his radios, but he had no heating other than electrical heating, and he wasn't expecting to have the heating on for a while, and it was freezing cold at the time. And so he was really suffering. He was saying, he was talking to me with his slippers and gloves and coats and scarves and beanies on. Anyway, so
His radio was working.
Yeah, but his radio was working. And if he had an old tube radio, he could have warmed his hands up over the globe. Then the batteries wouldn't have lasted long. That's about it.
So about 2015 at my old place, I indulged in a bit of prepper cosplay, you could say, and had about 800 watts of solar panels professionally installed on my roof, and I got them to run the DC down to my walk-in wardrobe, where I set up a couple of large SLA batteries and an 800 watt inverter. And I sort of chose this size as like a minimum viable off-grid playpen, basically, because it's like, obviously it could run my radios, it could run the computer, it could run a light, but also it could run my fridge. It took a bit of a hit when the fridge first powered on, but a bit of a whir in the inverter, but I got to use up the extra joules during summer. I would run an extension cord down to the kitchen and run my fridge, and also it could run a slow cooker. Like, it's not enough energy to run a hot plate, but it could cook things in a slow cooker if I wanted to. So I had food covered. Hilariously, this system ran for about 5 years, and the power did not go off once at my unit in Lenna Valley. At least not while I was there. So, the most fun lesson from all this is when it came to an end, I was doing some stuff and I took all the load off, but I still had the charge controller and the 2 big SLAs and the solar panels running, and it took me a few days to figure out what the funny smell was, which was the batteries overcharging and leaking acid everywhere. And so don't do that if you do that.
I've got all the stuff that Justin's already spoke about, batteries, inverters. I think I've got a 2 kilowatt inverter, a couple of different size batteries. I've also got, and they're reasonably new now, the power stations. They're like a inverter battery unit all in one. So I've got 2 of those now. One of them will do about 1800 watts, I think, and the other one 2800 watt surge, and the other one's about a kilowatt. But you can get them in larger sizes, and they're mainly they're sort of advertised as a fuel generator replacement that's quieter, but I still think a fuel generator is something that you need to have as well. If you're looking for something that you want to sort of make the most use out of, not just sort of when the power goes off, but if you're like going portable or something, then probably a Honda generator. They're always the RF quiet ones. They're also pretty good quality, very expensive, but they're probably the better ones. And I think, Rex, you mentioned about the fuel. I think the newer models now, you can run them all the way dry and they'll automatically switch off when they're out of fuel now, so that's a better way of storing them long term. The big topic, I think the Americans are always, because the zombies only appear in America, so they're always the preppers and everything there, so they kind of off-grid's the buzzword over there. And I think probably events like last week probably show that we are a little bit underprepared. There's a lot of people that don't really have, we're all tech people, so we sort of all have something, but there's a lot of people that don't have anything, and they're jumping on Facebook saying, "Oh, my lights are off. When's the power going to get on, Tasnet? What are you doing?" And all that. And it's like, get something to, just charge your phone, or get something to, the basics to do your, your fridge, your water, all that sort of stuff, the stuff that you actually need. Actually, when Tricky and I were going for a drive to put a generator in the other day, we were talking about Starlink. Starlink's probably a good option compared to, phones and everything, because it's pretty hard for the satellites to go off. I mean, they still can. There's always a chance that anything can go off.
That's in the next segment.
Yeah. But they're getting, like, all of the off-grid guys in the States are all using Starlink now, and they use that. So, and the other thing that we haven't sort of, I don't know if it's on your run sheet, but ARDEN. We don't do ARDEN, which is Amateur Radio Digital Emergency Network, which is repurposing old 2.4 and 5.8 gig links and dishes, and with custom software over the top, and it creates a mesh network, basically. Yeah, and then that way you can have like a redundant network running as well, so which is pretty cool to play with as well. So maybe it's something we should. I think they do it in New South Wales. I think Queensland.
Well, in New South Wales.
Yeah. So it might be something that we could have a play with and experiment with at some point.
And there's your data network. I'm not sure your name. Sorry.
Yeah.
That's the data network that we're talking about. So we can actually push data out in a mesh network, so it's got some resiliency.
Independent of the internet.
Independent of the internet. Yeah, well and truly.
Can I just mention one more other device that may become helpful, and that's the Meshtastic network as well, because that can also transmit and receive data over a network over RF as well. So that's another option that you could look at as well as a form of communication, because you can send it. You can. The one I've got, you can hook up your phone via Bluetooth and basically send a text message to another Meshtastic node that's within range. So I can say, for example, let's say Justin's in Westmoona, and let's say Hayden's in I'll I'll put him in Claremont. Let's say he's in Claremont, so I can send a message to him from Mount Stuart to West Moona, then from West Moona to Claremont, without having to rely on that phone connectivity as well. So there's another option as well that is worth looking at.
Back to Steve.
Well, I have to admit to living in a very new modern house that's all electric, has absolutely no redundancy, and I'm in trouble if the zombies come.
Okay. We'll have to work on that one. Some comments from the chat. And Ray Hamer, who is actually our newest foundation licensee, VK7 Alpha X-ray. So congratulations, Ray. Makes the comment, he said there is a guy using his electric car to power his house. Now, electric cars have a discharge function in them. So you can put the plug that's used to charge them, there is a separate plug that turns your input into an output. And most electric cars have built-in inverters, obviously, because they're multi-phase motors that run on hundreds of volts. But you can get 240 volt, 10 amp outlet, basically, that you can then use for 240 volts, obviously. But also there is an idea of electric cars becoming your battery bank in a local environment. And so basically the cars become your Tesla or your Samsung battery. So interesting idea. And there is certainly a discharge arrangement with an electric vehicle. Sorry?
No, that's all right. I just thought of something.
Yep. Go.
You're talking. Someone said about off-grid, on-grid solar setups and how they only feed back into the house and stuff like that. One thing about off-grid solar systems is have a look on places like Gumtree and Facebook Marketplace, because there's tons of solar panels on there that are really cheap, like X-grid panels. I remember talking to an electrician once, and he said it was because sometimes one panel would fail on the roof and the warranty would just cover them all, so they'd just come replace them all, and then all of a sudden this electrician's got like 20 panels he doesn't know what to do with, so he just sells them for like $25-50 on Facebook Marketplace. So you can get a pretty sizable solar system, and yeah, my cousin's got one, and in this latest issue that we had, completely off-grid batteries and everything, and just plugged into inverter, and away you go. And it's just panels that he's just collected over the years, just doing that. So it's a good way. Like, don't buy anything brand new, that's for sure.
Oh, and can I just say exactly the same issue with lithium batteries, 18650s. Most of my 18650s I have not bought new. I have bought from the Resource Tip Shop as laptop battery packs, and one or two of those batteries are faulty, but they throw the pack out because they're all in series, so as one goes bad, the others are perfectly all right. Thank you.
Okay, a couple of quick comments, please. If you're using your battery pack in your car and cycling it through your house, to do it in an emergency is fine, but to do it in the longer term is not fine, because you're actually reducing the life of your car battery pack, and it is going to cost you $1 trillion more than a house battery pack. That's the first thing. The second thing is powering your house up off a generator is good in theory, but I have seen people try to do things like that with double-ended 3-pin plugs on extension cords, and that's beyond. Yeah, thank you. That's very scary. If you are half thinking about that, I'd get a lecky to put in a GPO, a waterproof GPO, on the outside of your house so you can do it.
I use the example of Tasmaritime. They've got it wired such that they wheel a generator out, flick the switch, plug the generator.
And the other thing you do too is don't put the generator just outside your windows. So you give yourself a constant feed of CO. Don't laugh, it's been done. That was 1, 2, and the third one was the reason a lot of the panels come up for sale is because of the development of the panel technology is jumping forward so quickly. That to buy an older panel of the capacity that was around 5 years or 7 years ago is quite difficult. So it's actually, especially if it's an insurance claim, it's cheaper to put a whole lot on of new panels. Yeah. And then the inverter probably goes out too because it's below capacity. Thanks.
Now, anyone have any experience with wind generators? Because there's a comment here. Does anyone have a wind generator in the chat?
Yeah, I know Claremont Shopping Centre does.
Yeah, they don't do much. I've got 4 or 5.
NTARC had one on Mount Arthur.
Which blew itself to bits. Okay, thanks. Back again.
I carried that up, actually.
Did you? They're okay if you can break them, but like as in put in a brake on them, but otherwise they spin out of control.
Otherwise they break you carrying them up the hill, getting a new one in. Okay, the fundamental thing with a wind generator is it wants to be in clear wind up and above turbulence. If you live in the burbs and you've got houses around you, or you've got tall trees around you, or you're in a gully, don't even think about it. Because you need to be on preferably a ridge line, but on a ridge line that hasn't got really steep drop-offs. And your tower has to be, at a guess, probably 10, 12 metres high. Otherwise, it'll spend all its life hunting around looking for the wind, and that increases your wear and tear beyond belief, and you'll generate no power.
If you've got a building with hydro plastered on it, don't put them on the top of there, right?
No, that's right. and putting them on tops of power poles doesn't really help much either. I've got 4, I think, at the moment. 5 maybe, can't remember, different types. The multi-vane ones, which look like a conventional water pumping windmill, are basically a low-speed type device. The ones that have got aerofoils like an aircraft wing section, roughly, they're high speed. They'll spin up really well, but they generate a fair bit of noise. So that's another problem you've got in an urban environment. So you'd have to be quite keen to want to try and do it in town.
But the Savonius rotors.
Savonius rotors are good. They've got to be in clear air and high, but in terms of output, they're lower.
Yeah.
So they're more of a power source for, say, a water pump or something like that, as opposed to, you're trying to take, if you want to run your house, you might, 10 kilowatts or something like that. You're going to be looking at a off the top of my head, a 3 to 4 metre diameter wind generator up at about 15 metres, and you need the wind blowing, and you need good steady wind. So you probably want 20 watts. Yeah, well, we have. There's no real trade-off between the two. You need exposure. We could talk on that one for weeks. Okay.
Cool. The other one, Ken Duffy, Z04KD, who's one of the people on the stream. He lives in Christchurch. Makes the comment, sadly, we've had big earthquakes and power losses and mobile phone towers dying and all sorts of stuff. So they've experienced all of that. And he makes the comment, electric car feed was used by someone in Gisborne during the big storm last year, worked well. So there you go. Now, any final comments in that space, or I'll move on to an extreme space weather event. Greg, pass it down.
If you're going to backfeed your house with a generator, you want to make sure you open the main switch. Otherwise, you'll light up the neighbourhood. And
that's done a community service.
And if you're somewhere near a transformer, you can light up the high volts. And if power comes back, you might be out of phase with what's coming back, and your gen set might jump. I was on a hill, Coin Mountain, and somebody was doing that, and they hadn't opened up, and they lit up the 22k line, and the Tas Networks blokes weren't happy.
No.
So so if you're going to backfeed your house, open your main switch.
Happened in Dunalley Bushfires as well.
Did it?
Yeah.
So Justin, on that note, your connection point should have a changeover switch on it. So when you 3-point switch. Yeah, 3-point switch.
Off.
Genset off. Exactly. That's the standard. If you don't do that, if somebody gets injured or you burn your house down or whatever, you'll just walk away from it because you'll never get any recovery.
You need total isolation.
Yeah, exactly. And you need a lecky to put in for you so it's certified.
Back to you. Okay, so we'll move on. What I was, actually, VK4GEO, get a Sparky to install an inlet and proper changeover switch. Yes, well and truly. So, extreme space weather event. Some of you know, a couple of months ago, I was involved with the exercise Aurora, which was run by the National Emergency Management Agency, where 300 people descended on Adelaide to basically play out for 2 days an extreme space weather event. And that we're talking about a Carrington event, so an 1859 Carrington event, which at the time there were lots of interesting effects from the Carrington event. But so what we were talking about and the scenario we played out was there was solar flare, was detected. It affected some satellites, it affected some VHF and some aviation delays and a few other things. There was a coronal mass ejection detected. We had 17 hours before that hit us. Before that hit the Discover satellites. Now, the Discover satellite is a satellite out at the Lagrange point somewhere. I think it's a Lagrange point. And that enables them to determine the intensity of that CME. So up to that point, they've got an idea, but they don't have a good idea. Once it hits that Discover satellite, though, you've got about 15 minutes. So if it's an intense event, you've got 15 minutes to do something about it. So, so that was the sort of scenario we played out. It was an incredibly intense event of at least the Carrington level. What that meant was there was about 10 to 12 hours of no communication, no internet, no mobile phones, intermittent RF comms for at least 10 to 12 hours. So my question I wanted to pose to people was, how would you cope with 10 to 12 hours of no power? So we go into we've got a black state plan. No GPS. Now the GPS is an interesting beast, and there were lots of things that came out as part of the scenario play out. Because mobile phones rely on GPS for frequency stability. They can survive probably a day. That's the sort of specification. But any longer than a day, their frequencies start to drift. And eventually become ineffective. Obviously no navigation. There's potentially no NBN, no mobiles, no phones. You can't just go to the internet. You can't get a connection to it. There's no broadcast TV, there's no broadcast radio, so there were some interesting comments made by the ABC guy, the emergency radio guy from the ABC, that those generators would kick in on broadcast radios and things like that, but potentially in the outlying areas you wouldn't be able to hear it. You wouldn't actually be able to get it.
Just make a comment. Sorry. Just quickly on the subject of broadcast radio, and the same goes for TV, that all services these days are delivered via IP from central locations that are not in Tasmania. So they're the first things that are going to disappear, and you can bet your bottom dollar that no commercial facility has any kind of local backup that they can reliably use, and it's unlikely that the ABC has either.
I know. And I know the ABC here. A classic example was news. The news is generated here. It's uploaded to the Sydney Playout Centre, and then it comes back to us via Sydney. And in fact, this is the ludicrous thing. It's controlled by railway roundabout, goes to Sydney, comes back, goes to the mountain, and is transmitted. Now, I don't know whether there's, and I don't know, Anders, whether we know, that whether there's a way of bypassing that and going straight to the mountain.
You know, 50 meg link.
And it's what they call a ramp satellite backup as well.
Okay. So there is the ability to go straight there.
Yeah.
So okay, that's better. I'm happy with that. Happier. No electronic funds transfer.
Yeah, that's a big one.
So it's only cash if they'll take cash, if they're even open.
If cash is still around.
Well, yeah.
Fuel, and we talked about fuel earlier. You won't be able to go to the petrol station unless you can hand pump.
There's a little proviso in here. Nearly all our cars are electronically controlled. I was just saying, nearly all our cars are electronically controlled, and the electronics are not shielded. The same would apply to most small aircraft, in fact commercial aircraft as well. Lack of shielding, any semiconductor that's hooked up to a piece of wire potentially is going to get a spike. So before you can even get down to try and get some money out of the ATM, you're going to need some alternate transport, preferably a bicycle.
Not an electric bike.
An
electric bike is probably killed by now too.
I actually forgot. I was going to grab a roll of toilet paper and have it here, just as a reminder. But I jest. But groceries, the toilet paper, which seems to be a desirable thing in these emergency situations, but groceries, the same thing. And dare I say it, no or intermittent radio comms. Dependent on the event, it could be intermittent. You could get some through. You may for short periods of time, etc., etc. So one of the response strategies that we were working on as part of the scenario is how do you get a message, key messages like don't panic, this is a short-term event, just because you can't get to the internet isn't a reason to go off your tree. So those key messages get delivered locally.
Carrier pigeons.
No. Well, local councils, local mayors. Who are the people that people trust in local communities?
Nobody in Hobart.
Putting that aside.
Quick question. Would normal ABC type 7ZR frequencies work 936 in a ground wave situation?
Yes.
That's what I'm wondering, yeah.
Well and truly.
MF radio will
and
still be okay.
That was certainly what the ABC emergency radio guy was saying to us.
So then the next question is, who's got a valve radio so they can listen to it?
Correct. So local messages from trusted local people. You go to your town hall. But have a think about it. You need those messages with those people, and they need to know what that message is before it happens. And in the best event, you probably got 17 hours to do it. Now that's not bad, because you've still got internet connectivity. You've still got the ability to get messages out there.
And then you've got your conspiracy theorists.
Service Tasmania shops were the other one that came up. There are 29 Service Tasmania shops around Tasmania. They are go-to places. But even if they don't have power and they don't have the facilities, they can still put messages out into the community.
So in your scenario, if you're talking for 17 hours, you've still got power, you've still got comms, and people know it's going to come, there's going to be massive traffic jams because everybody are going to be running around trying to get supplies.
Oh, no, well,
so the other place where you could have notices up is the supermarkets and the servos.
Well and true.
But they could do a blanket text messaging on the phone network too before the event.
Correct. Correct.
The reality is, though, the 17 hours can only be forecast with about 30% accuracy.
Oh, correct.
Yeah. And if you start warning people every time,
it'll be the cry wolf thing.
It'll be. That's right.
Well and truly. And that's one of the things. That's one of the issues around these events, because from a risk management point of view, the likelihood is rare, but the impact is catastrophic, potentially. Potentially. That's very hard to sell to governments.
You say rare, I can speak up with my old school teacher's voice. Although you say rare, the symposium in France about 12 years ago, they forecast a Carrington event, 50% probability every 150 years.
Yeah.
And it's been 150 years since the last big one.
So anyway, I'll go around the room. Any comments? Any?
Just a question for you, Justin.
Go with your coat.
How big an event are you proposing here? How big an event are you proposing here? Is it going to be big enough to destroy any semiconductors that are connected to anything like an antenna?
The scenario we played out, no. That there was effects for 10 to 12 hours, and things started to come back online.
What about power grids?
But if it's an even more significant event, that may not be the scenario.
Because even with the Carrington event, the telegraphers were getting shocks off the line, and that's a lot of voltage and current available to destroy whatever's connected to that.
Those were very, very long lines to generate.
Correct.
And they're unbalanced too.
One thing they did learn is, remember, America went dead. They're all down, I think it was the Eastern Ball?
The Quebec event.
Yeah.
So it was Canada.
That there was ultimately caused by they'd installed some new equipment from memory to actually try and maintain a constant voltage across the grid. And they didn't quite have the settings right. And that is, it got out of balance, and then to start protecting itself, it just shut itself completely down. And it's not easy to what they call black start a grid. So from it,
we have a black state plan.
Something happened in 2016 in South Australia when the whole grid went down for 24 hours because of a storm event. It took down high voltage and it tripped the interconnector into New South Wales and Victoria. And we didn't generate our own power, so
spot on. And it's very hard to test those sort of things.
Yeah.
Like, let's just turn all the power off and see what happens.
It took them 24 hours to bring the power back on.
No.
Gradually.
So anyway, we'll go around because I'm interested in what people's thoughts are.
I just had one thought about, we're talking about the MF wave, and then the thing, if it's a big enough CME event that electronic devices will get damaged and you won't have a radio to listen to it. But what about if you have a little battery powered radio, and if you've got somewhere safe to keep it, like a safe, if you had a safe that's enclosed, and it's just a little cheap one that just sits in there with a few batteries, so that everything else fratzes out, but then you've still got a little portable radio. It's a good idea.
Right at the radio station still,
Yes.
Because it's a pretty big antenna it's got.
Yes.
Lessons learned from experiences with the Dunalley Bushfires is mobile phone comms, and even now, to what's just happened, don't even rely on anything more than 4 hours. I think it was one of the islands up, couldn't tell you which island it was now, lost all comms for a while.
That was King Island.
King
just
Island.
recently.
Yeah, it was. That's zero in and out.
Correct.
Which was rather interesting. But yeah, so I like your idea of the radio, the AM radio. It's probably one of the best bet for people. Have a listen, get information around. So I don't think your newly publicised TasGov app will work too well. TasAlert, yeah. But like we at work in repeaters, we go for about 6 days autonomy now. because what we learned from the Dunalley fires was the first couple of days you can't get in or out. The only people who could get in or out is like police and fire, and us we were just escorted in and out. But then I suppose, yeah, nobody had phone comms, and yeah.
And everyone was on a different radio system.
Yeah.
At least they fixed that.
They have. And from what I heard over the weekend, it was it's working really well, so it was brilliant.
Well, if there is an event that knocks out all your electronics, you'd be glad you kept that Swan 350, won't you?
I love it.
I missed that.
If all the communication goes out, I'd just be sitting very quietly for a day and wait and find out what happens. I've got enough to amuse myself at home without being on the internet, without ringing up somebody to say, and what are you doing now that the phone, now that all the phones are off? No, you just sit quiet, eat the food that you've got in your pantry that doesn't need heating up, and just enjoy being quiet for a while.
I've really got nothing other than I'm going to go out and buy as much toilet paper as I can and sell it on the side of the road.
Corner of the market.
Just a couple of small ones, and goes back to what you're saying about fuel and stuff too. In the UK, and I just checked, it is different here, the maximum fuel you're allowed to store at home is 30 litres. The maximum fuel, as far as I can tell in the quick search, is 120 litres. So you can store 120 litres of fuel here. I'm not saying you shouldn't store more than that. You can do what you want, but you would have to look after insurance if you had a house fire.
I think that's different in rural areas.
It's different in rural and different, farm.
1,000 litre tank or something.
Yeah, if you're a primary producer, it's different. But if you're somebody in suburbia, it's going to be limited.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the right number, but it's
well,
just.
this was on 5 acres. And
Yeah.
At least 1,000 litres, probably even double that.
Yeah.
Does that same with gas bottles as well?
I don't know. I just quickly looked then because I knew from the UK I had problems when I wanted to store more than 30 litres. You know, because that's not much at all. So, and the other thing is the AM radios are great, or emergency radios are good. I've got one, a wind-up one. They're useless if you don't know what frequency you should be on. So having a list of, what the ABC AM frequency is, what all the other frequencies, just having them printed out next to your radio, it's worth doing.
Just on that last business about AM radio, it's shutting down everywhere because digital is so much better and has better coverage. Unfortunately, most people that say that don't ever travel too far away from capital cities, and even capital cities are getting rid of AM radio. So,
do we have legislation though that says that there's only so many that has to stay on?
I don't know about that, but if you try travelling in outback Australia, there's not much.
Because the USA do.
Yeah.
They're not allowed to shut down AM.
Yes, and that's also a problem in the USA with battery cars, because a lot of battery cars don't have AM radios. Yeah. And as for what I do if that happens, I'm just going to sit at home and twiddle my thumbs, and if it goes bad, I'll go and sit in the caravan, because I've got quite a bit of power in there, and it also runs gas and a few other things.
I can sell you toilet paper.
I don't need toilet paper, and in the last toilet paper exercise, I know of a person that bought, what was it, 24 packets of 36 rolls or something. It worked out to something like...
You weren't going to dob me in.
No, not you. It was something like 900 rolls of toilet paper that this person stashed away. That's one roll a day for 3 years, roughly. Interesting. And another useful thing for gas stoves, the little portable disposable gas stoves, see if you can get the gas that's got an ISO in it. I think it's isobutane, because that'll work when it's cold. The standard gas does not work particularly well when it's cold.
Butane doesn't. Isobutane is better. Propane is better still. But propane's rare. Isobutane is reasonably common. Next.
Just a question about the satellites themselves. They will recover, because my understanding is that it wipes them out, a lot of them, the ones that are on the sun side at that time.
Yep.
Is there any truth in that?
Well, they've certainly had events, and Mars might be able to jump in here.
Yeah.
They've certainly had events where they've been damaged. But
That's part one. Part two is that AM stations, certainly the older styles, actually had built-in studios for such an emergency, mostly bushfires and so forth, so completely independent with a diesel generator and a small studio. But even if they don't, the new ones, you could take equipment along and just plug it in and get on air with the diesel, so that's quite easily done. It's just I'm not sure of the propagation of AM or MF with this event.
cool. Mars, on the satellite question.
Yes.
Yeah. Just answer the satellite question and we'll hand it back.
This possibly makes more complex the debate. But yes, a lot of the satellites won't recover.
Yeah.
The reality is that we shield things as best we can to go into space, but they already break all the time because they go through thermal shock of being on the hot side and the cold side, and they're being radiated, they're dragging on the top of the atmosphere, especially as time goes by. All of the satellites that we launch for these critical services are getting smaller, and we launch them into lower orbits, both of which shorten their lifetime. They're not being made by militaries anymore, they're being made by little companies, they're doing their best. So there's no standards in shielding and things like that. So yes, when you're talking about how we only have these intermittent interruptions because, the ground networks would be okay, even though from working with people who do space weather, we don't know the ground networks would be okay, and we have all these ideas about how you protect things like the power grid with these massive sinks, but we have decided that they're not worth the money. But yes, so it might be that places like Hobart come back relatively quickly, but there are lots of places where even their regular operation requires satellite backbones. So lots of regional Australia, if that happened and everything on the ground was fine, they will be disconnected for the indefinite future.
Yeah.
Like the recovery time for that is launching new satellite networks, and it's many orders of magnitude greater than Australia ever has. And we have too great a landmass to connect via ground. So at a certain scale, once you start debating this kind of event, Australia is one of the hardest hit and might not be able to recover in a lot of ways.
Interesting. Garry. Across to Garry.
Just a couple of comments. People talking about tank water and everything. I don't know how many people have got bucket taps on their tanks for just getting the water out of the tank without any pump, but that's a pretty handy thing to have.
Gravity feed?
Yeah, it's just gravity feed. It's all right until the water gets down to the level of the tank, then you hit the bottom tap, but nevertheless, if you've got good water, you can just walk over to the tank and fill the bucket up. But and the other comment I was going to make was I've got a generator at home for all the things that we've been talking about, but every time I've run the leads out and got everything set up, the power's come back on. So I've only used it a few times, I think, to make some light in the house overnight. So that's one of those things. So the power's always been on. But going back to the Carrington event, this book here is one Ken over here has written, and I haven't got into it very far, as you can see. I've only started, but one or two things I've got out of it is you can forget your Tesla because probably the smoke's going to come out of it. What everybody really needs is a 1967 Nissan Patrol, diesel, minimal electronics and a full tank of diesel fuel, and optional bull bar and firearm, And this guy, the chapter that I'm reading at the moment, he's still driving round. He's made it home, so I'm not sure how he gets on when he runs out of fuel. But in the book, it's really good. There's nothing's working, so you really need your big supply of toilet paper You need that to light smoke signal fires because nothing else is working, and we all need to go and learn semaphore flag messaging. So anyway, and don't forget the humble crystal set for picking up your AM radio. So doesn't need any batteries. But anyway, if the lights go out, best of British luck to everybody.
I just had a side comment from Fran. Toilet paper is no good if your sewerage pumps aren't working.
Long
Spot
on. It is true. It's still like a clean back.
I had a lot of fun writing that book, and I had to do quite a lot of research. The thing that still puzzles me, and I'm really am seeking an answer, is if you get a Carrington which actually measured several thousand volts on some of the telegraph lines and supposedly set some of the telegraph stations on fire. Now, if you get a Carrington of that magnitude, to what extent is it going to take out the semiconductors in our normal household life and vehicles?
Totally. Guaranteed.
Which means there'll be no water, no phones, no communication, no travel, no sewage pumps, but there's a bonus. I've got a dozen sheep on a couple of acres, and I've got a wood fire, and you're all invited to come down so long as you bring some good tin food with you. If not, you'll be met at the front gate with blood in my eye.
Who's next?
I've got to think back now to what I was going to say. Anybody wants a 1984 Nissan Patrol that has a solenoid and diesel and no electronics because the radio doesn't work, talk to me later. The thing that, my comment a minute ago about anarchy, that's going to be a really interesting one. I think what I would be doing is I wouldn't be sitting there with my lights on and my house ablaze looking really happy, because there's going to be an awful lot of people who aren't going to be like that and not going to be very happy. So I think you'd keep a fairly low profile. The other thing which could be very interesting is if you have electronic gates on your property, because you might be able to get out and not be able to get back in. Or locking systems on houses and things. There's going to be lifts in buildings, all of those sorts of things will probably not work. And I'm inclined to agree too. Yeah, I think there'll be a lot of electronics around the place. It won't be happy. And I have seen a power pole burnt down. We did that at Cape Grim once. We accidentally dug up the SWR earth line. Well, no, we didn't actually dig it up. The contractors putting in the new building dug it up. And Graham and I turned up at work the next day and swung open the caravan door, because we had a 40-foot ex-NASA caravan. And went, the lights aren't on. And then we turned around to go back outside, and we could see the remains of the pole smoking in front of us about 15 metres away. So that was a good day. That took, I think, 3 days to get organised.
The remainder of the transformer?
Transformer's on the ground, I think, from memory. I have a photo of it somewhere. It's pretty impressive. So those sorts of things do happen. And there was another disaster like that I saw happen once. I can't remember where it was now, just over the years. But I read yesterday in the Fin Review, they were talking about trucks. And one of their I think it's either a 400-tonne truck and they're aiming for 600 tonne, or it's a 600 and they're aiming for 800-tonne truck, and it's like a semi with trailers behind. And it's being used between a mine site that's too remote to put in rail and not big enough to warrant the cost of the rail. And so they're doing it with people at the moment, but it's going to be an autonomous system. And you sort of think, Carrington Event and trucks like that would be rather exciting. And they're working towards autonomous ships rather than having manned ships. So, and they all rely on GPS. It's going to be interesting.
Most of the trains.
Yeah.
Hammersley Island run autonomous trains.
Yes, they do.
New South Wales, they've got autonomous trains now too running.
Yeah, well, the maglev train in Shanghai is autonomous, and you're doing 400 clicks.
Airbus are exploring autonomous aircraft.
Yeah, that's another one. So there's a few things like that around now. Things GPS can be spoofed anyway. You can soon knock the signals out. But the thought of random ships floating around the ocean could be fairly exciting.
Probably quite a few. I'll try and get to them as quickly as I can. So the first comment with phone reception, when that goes down, Like with work at the moment, our buses run off the LTE 4G system, and down around Dodgers Ferry, the radios, when we turn the buses on, they literally come up saying no connection, with no service at all.
Bus says no.
Yeah, sorry, can't work today. So if a Carrington event was to happen, our company is spending I think it's quite a fair bit a month on subscriptions for these radios, just for them to all go down the toilet with a Carrington Event 2.0. No contact with the drivers, so we can't tell them if there's a job change. We can't tell them if that run's been cancelled. It's just nothing. Whereas we had an RF system where we could possibly put a tower there and go, okay, there's your. We can put towers wherever we needed them, and yeah, but basically do that. But no, we've gone down the path of a 4G system, which if the phone if the phone network goes down, sorry, can't get hold. Another one did a bit of a good deed last night, but I noticed a problem. Was the service station up in Davey Street had a maintenance update, and that was pushed through from the mainland to the point where the main lights went out, the fuel pumps were off, and the fuel attendant said, "Yeah, sorry, I can't serve you. I can't do anything. My point of sale machine's even dead until the update happened, until the update's finished." So we had to wait 15-30 minutes for the update to finally finish before the pumps came back online and he could start serving customers again. And if we have an internet outage because of a Carrington Event 2.0, you're most likely not going to get fuel unless that servo's running on its own system, because most of the modern service stations, which I'm hoping people will probably pick up on what I'm relating to, they run their point of sale systems remotely. So the server's probably on the mainland somewhere, and if the internet goes down, well, sorry.
The power will be out.
Yeah.
You won't be doing it anyway.
Well, yeah, there's that too. There was something else, but now it's gone out of my head. But
what about electronic timing on your diesel engines?
Good, that's true. Points, yes.
Most of the modern diesel engines have electronic timing now
So they have an
on the
electronic
injection system.
Electronic everything, yeah.
High pressure contrast.
Yeah.
So don't worry about your schedules. They won't run anyway.
You won't be able to sell your listing. Okay, the other half of the thing I thought of too, if you do buy a generator for backup, don't just leave it in the shed and never use it. Give it a run at least every 6 months. Modern fuels go off, so the fuel needs to be dumped out, otherwise it'll be useless and you won't be able to use it. So yeah, so preferably diesel rather than petrol, and just maintain the maintenance on it.
Firstly, we're only talking about 17 hours, like no one's going to die. Apart from people who've got healthy, like actual life supports died, right?
Yeah.
But you said there's a 15-minute window where we know it's going to hit.
But we know the intensity.
Yeah, that's right. I would assume that there could be some plan where there could be bulk things sent out by text messages. Because I think the biggest issue is panic. Like, the practicality of surviving 17 hours, I don't think any of us have got an issue. If people know that it's only going to last 17 hours, like, it's all gravy. It's a matter of people knowing that it's going to last 17 hours. Yeah. And you were talking about who do people trust? I was thinking every Christmas the Fireys drive all around the neighbourhoods, like chucking lollies to all the kids. Like, you know, if the Fireys are coming around with their loudspeakers going, "It's okay, don't panic," like everyone's going to go, or maybe, I'm assuming. Sorry? Yeah, throwing lollies and saying it's cool. The other thing I was going to say as well is, like, if I'm at home, like, again, like you ride it out and it's fine. If some poor people are at the shops or whatever and they're not at home and they can't get home, I'd like to think that people would just go, that's cool, like we'll just hang out together and wait. Like, you look what happens when there's flooding in regions. Like, we don't leave each other, like, and leave them out there for the crocodiles to get them. Like, people are happy to take them into their houses and look after them. So I actually don't think it's going to be the end of civilization the way some people would assume it will be.
And I think you make a good point, Lance. It's information and getting it out to people and saying, don't panic, this is the public order stuff. Sorry, Jim, I'm looking at you, but because that came up in the scenario, because there were a lot of coppers there who were talking, oh, you know, this is going to be a public order issue. So yeah, and I think by the end of it they were going, yeah, actually this is probably not going to be quite as bad as we thought. We're still going to have to do that, but it's not going to be, you know, the sky's not
in
going to fall.
2016, when we lost all the power in South Australia for 24 hours because of a weather event, there wasn't a public order issue then. And all the repeaters went down after about 8 hours. The mobile phone network died before the end of the 24 hours. We had no internet, no phone, no nothing, and
good test.
Everybody just stayed home and waited.
I think there will be one issue with this, if I understand correctly. When it's a major weather event, everybody knows it's a major weather event. If it's a Carrington event you're talking about, most people aren't going to know what's caused it.
No, if you've got 17 hours, they can be advertised on television and radio.
But you're also going to come up with the problem of the fear of the unknown.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and that's why I was saying, as long as I can get that message out when they know. Just and the
I think
other
we're confusing something here. You're talking about them having 17 hours. They're not going to be a public announcement 17 hours ahead.
No. It's going to last 17 hours.
Yeah, but nobody knows that.
No, and that's why we're saying when you've got your 15 minutes, it's about getting the information out. And if you can get your information out and say within 24 hours, like it's going to be back to normal, that's going to... Yeah, and that's going to make the difference if people know what's going on. The other thing I just wanted to ask...
It doesn't matter whether it's 15 minutes or 6 hours because most people won't hear it.
No, but if it comes out to people's mobile phones, for instance, it's there when you wake up and
Yeah,
you'll
but then
see.
Mars was just saying that it's going to knock satellites out that probably won't come back online forever. So
It's not going to affect us in Hobart.
So 17 hours really could be
I just think the zombies would be better.
Hang on. If you are an extreme pessimist and you, I don't know, you just have no faith whatsoever, I'd highly recommend The Road by Cormac McCarthy. That's a good one. Anyway, but the more on the radio topic, one thing that not many people know is that Bluetooth Low Energy 5.0 up has what they call coded PHY, which using the adapters available in standard phones, programmable on Androids particularly, you can get up to 1 kilometre range, point to point. So with appropriate software, you can do 125 kilobits per second over just Bluetooth with no other infrastructure whatsoever. I'm not aware of any suitable apps or whatever off the top of my head that might necessarily help you out, but if anyone wants to play with that sort of tech, that's might be fun to look into.
Interesting one, Justin. Generation. Me, being older, I don't care if I lose my mobile phone for 2 or 3 days. Other one like Hayden there, mate, he'd be shivering and shaking if he'd lost it for about 12 hours.
It'd be good because none of the morons on YouTube comments can make comments at the same time. A question for the scenario. So was the scenario so your 15-minute warning, and that's the side of the Earth that's facing the sun at the time?
Yep.
So
it's half the Earth.
So half the Earth. So it's not the entire Earth. So I guess that lessens the chances of what part of the Earth is actually going to cop it at the time. And half the satellites and stuff. And yes, it'll always be America because, you know, everything happens to them. But no, I think it'd be like, I guess we kind of got a little bit of a taster of it when COVID, when they said, oh, we're going into lockdown, and then all of a sudden people just went bananas, and you know, going into the shops, like when we had the even when we had the lockdown, you remember when that idiot guy come in with COVID and he was walking, and then we're all like on that Friday, I think it was, and everyone was like, oh, quick, we better go down, and Woolworths was full, and it was just crazy. But I think the balance is, as you said, is getting the information out to people in a way that says, look, it's not going to, it's not going to be very long. Just deal with it. Like, I mean, if I had,
still the fear of the unknown, they hate.
Yeah. Some people were definitely, but I mean, if I had a day off and didn't have anything else to do but just sit around, I'd do that as well. It'd be good. Just have a nice sleep.
It's not the 17 hours that you're worried about. It's the week after, before you can get reliable communications and
Things
power.
are intermittent for quite a while. As things come back on, they go off, they come back on, they go off. All of that sort of stuff.
You can talk about sort of domestic resilience, and so the same thing applies during bushfires or if you have a major power station outage. So probably in some ways, you know, the things that we've talked about really apply every day, even without a Carrington event, because you don't know what's around the corner.
The wild weather event we've just had in the northwest. People are still dealing with it.
Yeah.
They've still got power off. There's a couple of hundred people that have still got power off, and it will be for a significant amount of time.
But in times like that too, communities do band together. Smaller local communities end up helping each other out.
I've got lots of staff answering phones right at the moment for the grants, so government bands together.
So in the situation of industry, what about things like the pot furnaces and stuff in Camelco, or those sorts of people? You know, they couldn't. Yeah, they'd end up. That would cost them years to get it all up and running again. Yeah, there's probably lots of other situations.
I guess with millions of people with nothing else to do for 10 or 12 hours, the government are going to have to plan for the population boost in 9 months' time. Did we have a COVID baby boom?
Yeah, we had a COVID baby boom.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. I think we'll wrap it up at that. I think we're at 9 o'clock. So, thanks for your input. And the thing I hope out of this is you go away and think about the systems you've got in place. Think about potentially how to make them more resilient. Think about the issues that the issues you may not have thought about before. And I've got to make a comment. Thank you to Xavier, who's our cameraman, who keeps putting comments in the chat about doing such a good job as a cameraman. So thank you, Zave. But please have a think about it. If you want to have a chat with me, please, I'm happy to have a chat. And by all means, come up. I'll unfold a few things so you can see it up close and personal. But thanks for your input. I hope you've got something out of it, even if it's just going away and having a think about how you can better get over these sort of events. But they're going to happen. When they happen, who knows? But yeah, we need to think about it. And we're in a pretty enviable situation as radio amateurs who at least have some idea and some technological savvy about how to address it. So yeah, have a think about it. Anyway, thanks very much. Cheers.
I said sack.
Seems to me if you're going to mount. I
was wondering where he's.
How do you know?